So after reading Fairy Tale by Stephen King as of this video, his current release, I just wanted to go back and read at least a lot of his greatest hits, in which there are a lot of them. So I decided after reviewing all the comments under my Fairy Tale review that I would start with Pet Sematary, and I'm really glad that I did because in Fairy Tale my favorite parts of it were the more human interactions between the characters, and I felt like this book held on to that a lot more consistent than Fairy Tale, which I still liked Fairy Tale quite a bit, but this book, it felt more consistent, which I'm really glad about because immediately I fell in love with these characters, or at least experiencing these characters' lives. I really liked the dynamic that Stephen King added with Lewis, the main character, with him being a doctor and the kind of juxtaposition of death and even just with animal death. Now I want to keep this, at least first part of the review, fairly spoiler free, even though the book is almost 40 years old, or is 40 years old. So I know that a lot of people have already read it, but just in case for the people that haven't read it, I would say if you're curious about reading Stephen King, I do think this is a really good starting place for that. It does get a little bit grim towards the end, but I'm guessing you already would expect that going into a Stephen King horror book. I would say that it's a really good starting point. Okay, now getting into a little bit of spoilers, because I'm sure most people would probably want to hear my thoughts on different aspects of the story. I really liked the foreshadowing of the road because you almost get a little bit of a fake out with it, because the whole time I'm expecting, okay, this road's going to come into play, something is going to happen, something is going to get hit. And then so when it's the cat that gets hit, I almost thought that that payoff was done. So then when you're reading towards the end of the first part, I believe it was, that their son Gage died from running into the middle of the road. The way that he wrote that, it was almost like my stomach just like dropped. Like the writing in it was so good that it comes at a point where you almost don't expect it, but it's not a complete left field, kind of writing switch. Another quick thing that I noticed was, I'm sure that I missed a bunch of them because I haven't read a lot of his books, but I did notice that there was a Shining reference in it, and that reminded me of the Cujo reference in Fairy Tale. And I think there might have been a Cujo reference in this book, maybe, but I'm not entirely sure about that. So I'm curious that, because I love interconnected worlds within books, like the Cosmere, so I'm really excited to start reading these and really picking up more and more of those. And eventually when I get to the Dark Tower, which I'm thinking I'm going to start reading soon, that I'm going to really enjoy picking up on all the references and connections to all these books. Something within the book that I wasn't expecting within this was, going into this as my first Stephen King horror book, I was expecting a lot of horror in it, and there is that, but more towards the end, it's a lot of build up. So the first half of it, is very happy, and then it juxtapositions with the ending, which is very dark and very gross in a lot of ways. I never really got scared in it, but I did find it like very squeamish and disgusting, just centering around the Gage's death. That it shocked me, even though I shouldn't have, because I know I'm reading Stephen King, but it did shock me at how into detail it got and just disgusting it was. I just really liked the juxtaposition of everything, because the first half, like I said, is very happy and idyllic in a way, and then even when it gets dark, a lot of drama happens in it. I wasn't expecting the family drama of it, like with Lewis and his wife's family, and I found that really, really interesting to read because it felt very real and understandable. And you get angry with Lewis's father-in-law and just the way he's dealing with it, but then you have to understand that they're all going through grief in a different way, and then they already didn't have a good standing with each other. So just the whole family drama I really did find engaging, and I was almost hoping for a little bit more of that. So I'm guessing I'll get that in a different Stephen King book as well that you will recommend as well. Compulsion is a big aspect of this book, and it's something that I was slowly picking up on more and more, because at first you're like, this Judd guy, he just seems kind of crazy the way that he's bringing Lewis out to this pet cemetery. But then as Lewis starts to experience that as well, you start understanding Judd's side of it, and then you start just putting two and two together about what is actually happening with this cemetery. And I just found that really cool, because when you're reading it, like, I'm kind of feeling that as well, because what Lewis goes through and Rachel go through is such a traumatic experience that on top of just this level of compulsion, this otherworldly compulsion, bringing him and taunting him back towards this evil place, that you understand where Lewis is coming from in his actions. In a way, obviously he, like, deep down, that's something you want to have your child back, but he takes it a step too far, which is that evil compulsion that's bringing him to do this. But it's not written in a contrived way. It really feels very natural, and you're just, the whole time you're just like trying to get Lewis to come back and not do it, and then the otherworldly force is also affecting Rachel, his wife, or Judd, where they fall asleep, or where he falls asleep and her car breaks down. So you just start to it just starts to slowly unravel, and because I couldn't put the book down that last quarter of the book, and I just really loved that part. And because I've always heard that Stephen King's endings aren't great, so I was kind of going into this book expecting that, and I really did like the ending, especially because it almost feels like there's a continuation with it, because obviously we don't know exactly what happens with Lewis after the book, unless there's a reference to it in another book. But the way that his friend, or his coworker Steve, experiences it a little bit, but he moves far away, but it's still like in his mind. It kind of has this it continues to go on and on. There's almost no stopping it. Something that I really liked about this book. See, I'm not sure which Stephen King book I'm going to read next, even though I do want to read Salem's Lot, so I may do that, and it may bleed into November. So I'm hoping that if you want, I can keep continuing to do these Stephen King books as a first-time reader of his, and eventually start to pick up more on these connections between these books. I'm not sure what his world is called, like with Brandon Sanderson, it's the Cosmere. I'm not sure if there's like a name for his world, but I really am enjoying his books so far, and I want to continue to read them. So I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.